Okay, let's get to it. So what do we see in this particular question? Well, we see two individuals, right? So we've got John and Erica, and they can produce a certain amount of donuts and a certain amount of cupcakes. So John can produce 200 donuts or 100 cupcakes, given the resources he has. Erica, 150 or 50. Okay, this is a very common comparative and absolute advantage question. Now, what's nice about this one is that they actually give you the data in the table, right? So you don't actually have to search for it or, interpret it or analyze it in that way. They give it to you. But what we're going to do in a moment is we're actually going to put it in our own original table. So for one, it's practice, but also it provides an opportunity for you to have a little cleaner analysis of it, okay? But prior to that, let's answer this first question. The first question says, who has the absolute advantage? And remember, absolute advantage is when someone, a country, an individual, a business, can just flat out do more, right? Okay, so in this question, it says, who has the absolute advantage in producing donuts? Well, let's look at our table. Who can do or produce more donuts? John, that's right. So we're going to write John down here, okay? And let me actually go back. So page 12. All right. Now, also notice this, guys. They ask you who has the absolute advantage, but they also ask you to do what? Explain. Now, here's the way this works. On the AP exam, with respect to free response questions, you're going to get 1 point for answering the first part correct, and you'll get another point for answering the second part or the explanation. So an explanation is essentially the rationale, right? The why. So let's explain it. Why does John have an absolute advantage here? He can produce more, right? In fact, 200, I mean, last time I checked, is greater than 150. So yes, he can produce more. So again, follow my lead here, write in these answers so you have it as a reference point, especially when you're working on the material today, which will be all about this. The second question, letter B, says, who has the comparative advantage? Now that, of course, is something that we've been looking at, how to solve those problems. And to do this, and to make it, like I said, a little cleaner, let's go ahead and for practice, let's go ahead and create our own table. So follow my lead here. Somewhere on your paper on page 12, go ahead and start creating your own table. This is just good practice regardless, because, like I said, sometimes they're not going to give you the table. They're just going to give you the information, and you yourself are going to have to set it up. So let's at least practice how to do that. Okay, so right now we're filling in this information. That's really step one, is to input the data. Okay, so I have John and Erica, and they can produce either donuts or cupcakes, right? And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here inside the table the total amount, and I'm leaving a little space here on the side so I can do the ratios, okay? And again, I want this to look nice and clean. During our first skinning, I did it in that little box and it got a little sloppy, so that's why we're doing this. But it's good practice anyway, okay? All right. Now, we've got it set up. Let's go ahead and analyze this data to determine who has the comparative advantage. But before we do that, what do we need to determine? We need to determine, is this an output question or is this an input question, right? So how do I know that? Well, basically what I want to do is look at what's inside this table. So inside this table are the total amount of what or what? That's it, donuts or cupcakes. So do you remember the last week when I said, whatever's in the table, just put it in the middle of the room? So just imagine you got a bunch of donuts and cupcakes. That's a final good, right? It doesn't say the total amount of labor hours to make a cupcake. It doesn't say the total amount of machines or dough or wheat or any of that stuff. It says, look, these are the total amount of cupcakes and donuts. Therefore, everyone together now, this is an output question. Very good. Output. Okay, because it's output, we're going to use the which method? Other goes over. Output, other goes over. Good. All right. So when we do our ratios, that's how we're going to set it up. What that means, I'm taking numbers from one column, putting them over the numbers from the other, actually row, and vice versa. Okay. So those become my numerator while the other one becomes my denominator. All right. So coming over here, I'm going to take 100 and put it over 200, and let's just reduce it down. So 100 over 200 breaks down to what? 1/2. Now the question is, 1/2 of what? Well, here's how we answer that. The way we got to look at it is when John focuses on donut production per unit, that is 1 donut, right? He's going to give up some of the other item. So if he focuses on producing 1 donut, he has to give up 1/2 of a what? That's it, cupcake. Good job. Okay, so what this is in here, this 1/2, is the opposite of whatever is above it. That's how you figure that out. Whatever's above it, the opposite's in the row. Okay, so let's do Erica here. Every time Erica focuses on producing 1 donut, she gives up what? 1/3 of a cupcake. Good. Okay? Now, if you kind of lose me along the way here, you're like, uh-oh, I just lost it. That's okay. You got lots of chances to practice it today, okay? All right, going over here. Let's look at the per unit opportunity cost of cupcake production. So how much does 1 cupcake cost each one of these individuals? And what I mean by cost is if they choose to produce cupcakes, they have to give up some donuts and vice versa. It's like, do y'all remember Links and Smiles? Mm-hmm. If you made some links, what'd you have to give up? That's it. And so vice versa. All right. So John, if he produces a cupcake, has to give up 200 over 100 or reduce down to 2 to what? The opposite of what's up here? Donuts. That's right. Okay. And Erica has to give up 150 over 50 or 3 donuts. Now, when I break this down, what I'm looking at is who can produce the respective product at a lower opportunity cost. In other words, I want the individual to produce the item for which they can produce it at a cheaper rate, right? And so one of the tricks that I mentioned on this is kind of like a little trick or tip, is if it's hard for you to look at these as like barter, you know, like products, you can change this 2 and this 3 into what? What can we change that into? Dollars, that's right. So you can change that, and now it looks a little clearer, right? Okay, so the question is, who has the comparative advantage in producing donuts? Okay, well, let's look at it. When I'm looking at donuts, 1 donut is going to cost John 1/2 of a cupcake, or really it's like saying it's going to cost him 50 cents. And for Erica, it's going to cost her 1/3, or what would be like saying 33 cents. Okay, so let's look at this whole table first, then we'll answer that question. I'm going to look at this side because it's just a little bit cleaner with the numbers. John, if he focuses on producing a cupcake, it costs him $2. It costs Erica $3. Who can do it cheaper? That's right. And over here, it costs John 50 cents to produce a donut, and it costs Erica 33 cents. Who can do it cheaper? There you go. Okay, so now let's answer our question. Who has the comparative advantage in donut production? That's it. Good job, Erica. Okay, but again, what do we have next to there or tagged at the end of this question? That's right. So how could I explain it? Excellent. Excellent. Her opportunity cost is lower. She gives up less. Something like that, right? So her opportunity cost is lower relative to John. That's exactly right. Okay, very good. Okay, that's part 1 of the question. Part 2, we get into the terms of trade. And so that's what you guys saw in the video yesterday, what are called the terms and gains from trade. So let's break that down. What's nice about this question is they actually give us the terms of trade. They say, assume that John and Erica decide to specialize. What does that mean, specialize? Do what they're best at doing. That's right. According to the comparative advantages, which we just identified down here. And that 1 cupcake, here's the term of trade, pay attention to this, 1 cupcake is going to be traded for how many donuts? 4 donuts. And so now we got to go, look, does that make sense for both of these people? Okay, so how do I figure that out? Well, that's what we learned yesterday, so I'm going to put that on the board here in a second. And to figure this out, what I like to do is to create what I call per unit opportunity cost PPF. I'd like you guys to write this down as well because it's good practice, and I think it'll help you to answer this question. So initially what I'm looking at here is what is the per unit, right? What is the 1 for? Well, in this case, it's cupcakes. So I'm going to go ahead and put my dot here, my bullet point, and label 1. And this is going to be cupcakes here, right? Cupcakes. So cupcakes are on the Y. And again, I'm looking for per unit. They give it to me. 1 cupcake, 4, right? 1 per unit. And so if cupcakes are here, then donuts have to be here, right? Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place on the x-axis the opportunity cost for each one of these individuals. So let's go down to our table. Every time John produces a cupcake, how many donuts does it cost him? Or I should say, how many dollars is it? 2. Yeah, that's it, right? So you can just put that here. Let's put that 2. And for Erica, how many does it cost her? Right? And so then what I do is I just connect the dots. That's John. And that's Erica. Now going back to yesterday's lesson, when we look at this, the terms of trade, the trick is the terms of trade should fall where on this per unit PPF? What'd you say? Between 2, in between. That's right, between 2 and 3. So what would be a nice round number for us here? Something like that, 2.5. There you go. Okay, that's what the terms of trade should be. But that's not the terms of trade, right? They say 1 cupcake for 4 donuts. And so now I want to see, is this good for both? Bad for both? Good for one? Bad for the other? Let's take a look. Okay, so John, right? This is John's PPF right here. Okay. If John in his country gives up a cupcake, right? So he produces a cupcake and sells it. How much is he going to get for it in his country, or domestically, or on his side of the island, whatever you want to say? $2. So think about it. You have a cupcake, you sell it for $2, right? But based on the terms of trade in the free response, how many dollars is he getting now for it? Right? So let's call it domestically, because that means in his country. He gets $2 for the cupcake, but now he's getting 4. All right? Is that a good deal? No. Yeah, I would say so. In fact, he has gains from trade. So what are his gains from trade? $2. That's right, or plus 2, right? So he gets $2 extra than he had before this trade. So is that good for John? Yes. So we're going to answer this first part. Indicate whether this is beneficial to John. Yes, it is. It is. He's getting $2 more. That's a good deal any way you slice it. Okay? Now, Erica. Erica wants a cupcake. How much money is it going to cost her domestically if she wants to buy a cupcake, let's just call it in her own country? $3. So if she was, let's just say, in her own country, it would cost her $3 for a cupcake. Is she going to buy a cupcake from John for $4? Does that make sense? No, that'd be like saying, here in the United States, here in the United States, it costs us $300 to produce an iPhone, but we're going to buy one from China for $400. Right? That would make sense. Why would we trade with China? Why do we do that? Because it's cheaper, not because it's more expensive. Okay, so that doesn't make sense for Erica, right? And so indicate whether or not specialization in trade are beneficial. Erica, it's not. So let's just put no, that's not beneficial. Now, why isn't it beneficial? Well, because it is more expensive for her. So the moral of the story is John needs to get more than 2, right? 2.25, 2.75, whatever. And Erica has to give up less than 3. It has to be profitable for John and cheaper for Erica, right? Because John's making the cupcakes, Erica's making the donuts, and they're trading. They're not going to trade, well, Erica's not going to trade a 1 for 4. She's not going to do that, okay? All right, last part of the question, then we'll wrap it up. Any questions so far? All right. The last part of the question says, assume that Erica discovers a new cupcake production technique that will increase her daily production of cupcakes only, which means she's not getting better at what? Donut production. So they say, look, create a PPF. So everybody do that. Use donuts on the horizontal axis, which is the X, okay? And use cupcakes on the Y. Then it says, Draw correctly labeled PPC for Erica before and after the technological change in cupcake production. Okay, so let's go with the total amount. How many cupcakes can Erica produce when she's using all of her resources efficiently? Total amount. 50. How many donuts can she produce? 150. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that there. Now let's connect the dots. All right, there's our PPC. Now, to illustrate this increase in cupcake production only, would I shift this entire curve outward? Like, should I go, like, have a whole new curve out here? No. So what should I only see an increase in? That's right. So this is how it should look, something like that. Boom. And there it is. Okay? So this is, I think we figured it out last class, a 7-point question. This would be kind of a, I would say probably a moderately difficult question. Usually they give you an easy, sort of a middle, and then a hard. This is probably a middle, I'd say. Not too bad. Sometimes you'll get standalone questions like this. Sometimes you won't. But comparative and absolute advantage will definitely be on the exam, okay? We need to be able to calculate if it's an output or an input, and we need to be able to calculate the comparative advantage as well as the gains, terms of trade and gains from trade, okay? So that is it for today. Are there any questions on that?